marginal level, you will see the others also merging. Because when that crisis has not come, we were complaining of all the other factors coming clear. But suddenly, because that has also become a point where it has also become a political, ideological campaign strategy, that is why it's empowering too much on the noise.
Okay.
But I'm telling you,
so you're saying there's also some level of politicking. But let me see whether I understand what you said.
Yeah.
You're saying that because we're overemphasizing on perhaps the state of energy, which is may have been contributing, your estimation, 60% of the difficulties we're facing, we seem to be neglecting other critical areas like agriculture, and the other relevant sectors. And you said they'll come back to haunt us. How?
Definitely. Yeah, because when they solve it, and now we have the playing grounds, and businesses are now dwelling. Now the other symptoms that were ignored will begin to reflect. And then you realize that you think the malaria was gone, it's not gone. It will then come back again. This is where we are finding ourselves. We want them to know, especially for me, I'm not the one that actually advocates so much on the sector issues, but I rather advocate on the SME ecosystem of Ghana. That need to be solved. And we think it has to be of policy situation. Because the issue now here is, it is easy for the micro enterprises, which are the majority in the system, to migrate or possible transition to the small. But there is no ability for most of them to transition to the medium. Only few, when you check the percentage of the transition, so most of the medium enterprises are the international businesses that have been in the country for a longer time, and they are characterized to look as if they are domestic. So then you understand that this is the area that the funding most of the time circulates from. So when it still happens, it happens that most of the money are drifted back, so still you wouldn't have the
So impact. You're saying there's huge capital flight. And it also could be contributing to the worsening situation already we're witnessing alongside energy, etc.
Yes, because most of your people who supposed to contribute
are not empowered
to the economic development are the one at the base. And you are now creating a situation called cyclical effect. The effect at this point is that those are the base. Every government deficit budget has a strong negative impact on them. But those are the medium scale, the impact is quite minimal. Because when you check on the Bank of Ghana report, you realize that they stated categorically that the rate of when they did their bank survey in terms of credit accessibility to the business, to the SME, it was quite marginable difficult in assessing. But to the large corporation, there was that ease. I quoted.
And you are saying that that's all, the ease is the bracket where the big businesses are, and the big businesses necessarily are not locally owned.
Are not locally owned.
Okay.
So what you are then doing is that you empowering another economy, because all the funding that circulates into that angle drift out. It doesn't reflect.
And you're saying it's something also we're not focusing on. We're only focusing on energy. Plus, we also need to be looking at the micro level.
That is the issue, because it has been for too long where we are talking of SME are engine for growth. Yet our people are not doing anything to address that situation. A lot of papers are on the table. By this time, we expect government to sit down, work on policies, just as the way they went there to sit for that economic brainstorming. I'm expecting them to come out with policies that will address that challenge.
You're referring to the Senzu.
Senzu.
Okay. Now let's shift. Let's now focus on the subject of energy. We've been told consistently that it's because we haven't invested over time, and if we're talking over time, we're talking decades, and it could be several governments, into energy infrastructure, into the strategy for provision of energy, and even revenue as far as the distribution end is concerned. Once we have identified the problems, why is it that now we're not putting in place the needed measures beyond what we're already doing to resolve them?
Some of these cases you had raised, and sometimes I call it a little of a fallacy. Why? Because
they are not true. I read them in books all the time. I'm told by economists and also energy experts.
You should understand that even though it is part of our activities as researchers to make sure that every paper we produce are not biased, but for many years you have known that some of the research publication had been biased just because of a certain side they side with. This has been the challenge. If you look at now what the country can produce, the megawatt we are producing, you don't expect us to go into such a situation. That is the challenge. And so somewhat, because I'm not quite more in the area of energy specialty, but I've followed.
No, we're looking at the effects of energy on the economy.
And the economy.
But we still just need to talk
because it's
a little bit
a little important from there. from many papers I've read, it's not most of the time the issue of the generating, but it has been accessibility of the fuel to empower it. And I was very happy about that. Because when you study the history, following their papers, they have prepared the history, where gradual add up of megawatts till the time we came on, and so many promises that followed. All this time, there had been an addition. There had been an introduction. So now, the first question I ask you is, if you know that the cities are the one that contain most of the businesses, that empower your businesses, empower your economy, and then you realize that part of your political campaign is to extend electricity to the rural areas where there is no much generation of that, in your political decision, what do you think would have been the best thing to do? Are you then going to extend it just to answer the will of the people who are just using the television, just using the light to watch televisions and other programs, not generating any economic return, and then deprive your cities that are producing the business?
I get your point. Nobody has made this very point, I think, in the whole debate. But the point is, there are communities in this country who for decades have not cited electricity. And if for the first time any government will want to extend electricity to them, that is also helpful too. It could also be the beginning of an initiative where we could have a lot more SMEs coming from those areas also. People depending on those things for livelihood.
Then I ask first question, did they do their economic thinking and calculation very well?
That if we extend and we increase demand, and what will be the effect on businesses?
Simple as that. Simple as that. The problems that are coming, why I sometimes side with some of the political parties, is simple as that. It looks as if that we don't do the calculation. Are we running the system by try and error, or we are moving in the principle of logic? And principle in a principle of logic, where we know that we take action AB, it should result in DC or CD. Is it what we are doing, or possibly we try to take action AB, anticipating of a hope, some supernatural intervention, making it generating CD as a result, without not actually believing that we are going to get? When you do that, you lack confidence in being able to project whatever good knowledge and ideas you want to do to the better of the people. If it's true, yes, they have extended it to the villages. But what has been the effect? Has it made the government popular or unpopular now? So you see the impact. So all this is supposed to be weighed, because sometimes you are meeting a party ideological interest, but you end up even worsening the whole good initiative that you have embarked. So that's what we
for the state as well. Okay.
Is it well calculated? Yes.
Okay, so if that is a state of energy provision,
yes,
and we know that according to the statistics that are being churned out across the public discourse, we're told that businesses are now cutting down on staff. And we know normally if you want to cut down on costs as far as your overheads are concerned, you have to cut down on areas like what you spend on wages and salaries, etc. And those are prudent business means. So that's what the businesses are doing. But they've got consequential effects, right?
Let me come in. If we want to follow a particular hypothesis, possible that is what government is using, we call it a double deficit hypothesis. Let's analyze government expenditure. That formula indicates clear or postulate that anytime that government spend more and create more deficit, it is to empower its economy. Because what it does is that, according to that hypothesis, I'm bringing it, and let's look some scientific analysis from here. What it does from this point is, when the government is spending, the spending is, according to the theory, sent to the banks. It deposits to the banks, more of the private banks, than what government collects from the banks through taxes. That is the principle. That means in one way or the other, it's quite beneficial. That means when the banks get such amount by the expenditure, they also need to issue credit to the benefit of the SME economic, and therefore we can see it working. So that means at this point, that theory becomes sense when we are using that formula. That means more government deficit, more government spending, we can see an economic return on that to the benefit. But this is the problem we have in Ghana. What happened in this point is, the more we see government, most of government businesses which are domestic are on the base level. That is what I'm talking about. So most of the time, the deficit of government, its spending, has a negative effect. When you are at the base level, what happens is you are part of the micro and the small. So yes, the monies can go back to the private banks. But now when you look at Bank of Ghana's report again, he indicated that when they look at the end note, the full ending note of the banks from 2013 to 2014, it was encouraging, and they are even opening more branch. That means through by that sectorial, we call it the sectorial framework. That formula, that means it's working. More monies were getting to the private banks. And again, he indicated that about 42.1% were extended as a credit line to the business. That is much more happy. But the question Bank of Ghana limited in terms of its financial analysis is that he never defined which businesses benefited from that 42.1%.
And if you say here, I hope you're not referring to the bank of the governor. Please refer to it as an institution.
As an institution, they never did that. They have never defined it. So now it brings us to that story is that now again they backed it with a point that credit accessibility was more ease to the bigger businesses. Well, and the small businesses.
So again, this is a concern. But doesn't it then suggest that we're not spending right? Because if we're borrowing so much, but perhaps the larger chunk of the investment into huge infrastructural projects and capital projects, so to speak, and each time this is going to a bulk of businesses that would always perhaps not be local as far as their content is concerned or equity is concerned, it means that we're not spending right, are we?
How could you define that you are not spending right? The issue that we have is that government don't have right policies to address that. Because the reason why I use the word, I can't say not spending right, is that, you see, I don't want to be on a political arena, but I want to be more of intellectual. The issue here is government is working on infrastructure. Possible maybe by an economic analysis, they have identified a demand. So if they have identified that there is a supply, then on that basis, the infrastructure investment could make a sense. So if he's making a sense working on infrastructure systems of that nature, the monies are getting to the private banks. If they are getting to the private bank, how is it being swept into the floor economy? The challenge here is that the money is swept to the large companies. And therefore, that large companies are from external economy. So it reflects in the economic system. And your baseline is still suffering.
That's the micro level.
That is the micro
level. So that
level.
is why you can see, well, you can see all sorts of infrastructure and investments going on. But at the micro level, businesses are suffering.
Which are the engine of your economic growth? They are not receiving that sort of funding. So therefore, they are still choked. But you are working at that top level. And you will see more banks are springing up. They establish.
And to you, that's a flaw in policy.
That is a flaw in policy. It is nothing any other more. It's just a flaw.
Dr. Senzu, how do we correct this?
We correct it as so simple. I would have always been happy where people were calling for that together sort of meeting where different political ideas comes on the board. They need a strong policy to attack that. Either the government has not identified that as a challenge, as a now. He may have not considered, because there are many problems on government, very difficult to address. So maybe they have not identified that. So we think that maybe by this platform, that could be well known and therefore take it also equally as an important challenge to address with the policy, equal like the power crisis.
I'll be very much surprised if the government has not identified it, because they have all sorts of funds around, a venture capital fund, a number of them. We have EDIF, the Export Development, Agricultural and Industrial Fund, etc. But what businesses could tap into. And of course, these are lodged at the bank. So you go, you can tap into once you satisfy the requirements, the benchmarks you're given.
In the realistic implementation, have you ever gone there to see? I had a paper that wrote, if I go to the bank as an SME, and the bank is going to classify me as a small SME, and go through that rigorous procedure that a commercial business, like Anglo Gold, will go to, do you think I will win the fund? Now, there was a research paper which was published by PwC, which Power Water Price House, I know that.
Price Waterhouse Cooper.
They indicated, after one of their research, which I wrote in one of my paper, it indicated clearly that the bank's interest in dealing with SME is that they have seen them that they are good advantage of depositing. But they are not good in advantage in terms of lending. So in this basis, what do you define that parameter?
Okay.
So that is our challenge now.
So the banks are collecting a lot more deposits. That is also perhaps reflecting on the performance of the banks annually. And if you do a critical analysis of the performance of the banks at the end of the financial year, you made the conclusion there's so much in the economy, but then you're saying that it's skewed as far as the inflows or outflows are concerned.
Much, much more as the fact. And the problem is that the banks should be very circumspect and more be innovative in terms of their SME package. They cannot pass through an SME who is a startup to go through the same measurement that a commercial banks will go through as a basis to award them loan. And the most surprising, an SME is taking about 10,000 or 20,000, and the one who is a commercial is taking almost about 1 billion, and you go through the same procedure. Then that means it's an intention not to give them the credit,
but you
to
say,
be able to assess them.
You said these could only be corrected by policy. But what nature should the policy be? It should be a policy that is acceptable to all, a bipartisan policy, or what?
No, it has to be a universal policy, a setup policy, leaving a clear fundamental. One of the areas they need to tackle is even a principle governing the banks, how they should be able, or they can even create a certain simple measurement procedure in being able to award credit to SMEs. It should be that simple. Maybe possible Bank of Ghana will be saying that is why they brought the microcredit finance and those things. They should go back and test how effective are they being.
But Dr. Senzu, you do agree that all the all the small and medium scale enterprises could get access to all the credits, but they don't have reliable energy supply. They won't work adequately. How does that have a repercussion on their P&Ls at the close of the day? Also based on their performance, actually, as far as the operations are concerned.
Simple, as you indicated, energy is a very important asset to help to empower businesses. Now, if I have all the capital to run my business and I don't have the necessary power to enable me to empower the activities that are going on, I realize that some of the projects that are going on by the small level, they are more like demanding light for it, and they don't have the capacity to buy the bigger plant and generators orders. So it's also a major factor. But as part of my special, I've always said that even though it's a major issue that carry about 60%